Brennan Yates paid $5 for a rusted toolbox at the county landfill. The same morning, his electric bill sat $240 past due on the refrigerator door. His 6-year-old daughter waited in the truck with a one-eyed corduroy badger pressed to the fogged glass, while a Billionaire's crew shoved the box off a flatbed, without checking the lock or the weight. Brennan checked both. Under a seized padlock and waxed oilcloth sat bearer bonds worth $5 million, hidden by a dead man whose son had signed a sworn affidavit claiming they did not exist. That signature was about to become the most dangerous paper in Braddock Ridge, and Brennan was about to become its only honest witness. Brennan Yates counted $11 in ones and loose change against the flat of his palm, while the scale house line crawled forward at Braddock Ridge County Disposal. The morning wind came off the landfill like it had been stored somewhere metallic overnight, carrying the smell of wet concrete and turned earth and the high whine of a loader backing up on the hill. Behind him on the truck's bench seat, Nell sat cross-legged with Copperpot the corduroy badger tucked inside her coat, only his one black button eye and the green ribbon tied around his ear visible above the zipper line. She had not complained about the cold, which meant it was worse than she would say. "Stay in the truck until I wave," Brennan said. "Copperpot wants to supervise." "Copperpot can supervise from the window." He needed an impact set. The one he'd lent to a framing contractor in October had not come back, and new ones cost more than the electric bill, which was $240 past due and pinned under a magnet on the refrigerator. At the salvage pad, he bought a handful of crescent wrenches and a hand riveter for $6, wrote the date and source on masking tape, and pressed a strip to each handle before setting them in the truck. Velma Rook was sweeping amber glass off the scale house pad with a push broom while arguing with a crow over a sandwich wrapper. She had logged Brennan's salvage purchases for 4 years, without once asking why a man with a diesel mechanic's hands was buying wrenches from a dump. A flatbed from Kedder River Works backed into the contractor lane. 2 men in company polos rolled renovation debris off the bed, and at the bottom, shoved off last with a boot heel, a Kennedy chest-style toolbox the color of dried blood. It landed on the concrete with a sound too heavy for empty sheet metal, and the hardened padlock on its latch did not bounce. It held like a fist. Velma logged the Kedder load tag. Brennan watched the crew pull away without a backward glance. "That one's tagged salvage," Velma said. $5 if you want the headache." He paid. Nell pressed Copperpot's face against the truck window as Brennan slid the box into the bed, and the badger's button eye fogged a small circle on the glass. "Is that box locked because someone wanted to keep tools in?" Nell asked as he climbed into the cab. "Or keep people out?" "Could be both." The duplex sat at the end of a gravel alley in Braddock Ridge, the rear unit backing up to a one-bay garage. He set the Kennedy box on his welding bench and tried penetrating oil on the shackle, letting it sit while he organized the morning salvage. Nothing. He heated the lock body with a propane torch at low flame, moving in slow circles so the brass expanded evenly, then tried tension with a flat-blade screwdriver seated in the keyway. The pins would not give. Corrosion had welded them to the housing. Gus Ibarra came through the side door holding a mower blade he'd been grinding next door, the steel still ticking as it cooled. He stopped by sound. The bench grinder on Brennan's side had gone quiet, and tilted his head at the box. "Sealed shut," Brennan said. He clamped the toolbox in the padded vise, shimmed the jaws with leather so the sheet metal would not dimple. He draped a wet fire blanket over the box seams below the lock, fitted a diamond cut-off wheel to his angle grinder, and knelt so the wheel would meet the shackle at a shallow approach, less heat driven downward, less risk of sparks entering unknown contents. Nell set Copperpot on an upturned milk crate 3 feet from the bench. The badger's one-button eye faced the grinder like a shift foreman. "Stop talking when the wheel touches," Brennan said. "Sound tells me where the heat is." The wheel sang high and thin against the guard, then dropped a quarter tone when it bit hardened steel. Brennan held the approach angle steady, paused twice to let the shackle cool so the diamond matrix would not glaze, and cut through in under 90 seconds without a single spark touching the box seam. The shackle halves separated cleanly, rang on the concrete floor, and rolled in half circles before they stopped. Gus set down the mower blade. "That is not how a man opens junk." Brennan carried the box to the kitchen table. Nell followed with Copperpot riding her forearm like a dignitary. Inside the Kennedy box were not tools. 3 packets sat in the tray where socket rails should have been, each wrapped in waxed oilcloth and sealed at the folds with beeswax that had yellowed over decades but had not cracked. They were heavy and dry, and they smelled faintly of linseed and something older. The smell of paper kept from the air on purpose. Brennan pulled on nitrile gloves from the first aid box under the sink and unwrapped one layer of the first packet. Corporate bearer bond certificates, engraved borders in green and black, coupon sheets still attached at the perforations, serial numbers running in sequential blocks, and issue dates stamped 1981 and 1982. The denominations were printed in a typeface that belonged to bank lobbies and estate vaults, and nowhere near a rented duplex kitchen table in Braddock Ridge, Pennsylvania. Gus read the face value of the top certificate. He stopped breathing through his nose. He looked at the kitchen window, then the door, then back at the certificate, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something more reasonable. "Brennan, that is not a receipt." Brennan set the certificate down flat, opened his spiral notebook to a clean page, and wrote the date, the toolbox source, Velma's ticket number, and the packet count before he touched another thing. Nobody eats until this is written down. He inventoried every serial number, every coupon count, every issue date. Nell watched from the kitchen doorway with Copperpot pressed to her chest and asked if the papers were important. "I don't know yet," Brennan said. "That's why we write it down first." He drove back to the scale house the next morning. Velma pulled the original disposal ticket. Yellow carbon copy, time-stamped, load origin Ketter River Works, contents marked construction scrap/misc metal. While Brennan read it, the fax machine behind the counter shuddered to life. A corrected form on Ketter letterhead claimed the toolbox had been placed in the wrong lane and remained company property. A handwritten note at the bottom requested the salvage purchaser's name and cooperation. Brennan read it twice. Nell sat on the counter stool with Copperpot in her lap, kicking her heels against the metal stool base in a rhythm only she could hear. "I'm not signing that," Brennan said. Velma looked at the faxed correction, then at the original yellow copy in her other hand. She waited. "My daughter knows I return library books. I'm not teaching her different for $5 million. Velma folded the yellow copy once and slid it into her personal drawer, the one with the lock, instead of the file tray. "Then I guess this yellow copy stays yellow." The 31st floor of Vantage Trust and Transfer smelled like toner and cold air returns and the particular quiet of rooms where money is discussed in low voices. Brennan carried one sealed packet in a gallon freezer bag and the disposal record in a manila folder. His boots left faint gray marks on the corridor carpet. Nell stayed in the lobby with Copperpot on her knee, asking the receptionist for a piece of tape with the focused politeness of a child who has been taught that asking is not begging. Simone Adebayo met him in the glass-walled conference room with a legal pad, a pen she uncapped but did not click, and no handshake. She was 42, dressed in charcoal wool, and she asked questions the way a locksmith sets pins, each one precise, each one testing whether the cylinder would turn. "People do not walk into trust offices with fortunes because they feel honest," she said. "Then record the room." She studied him for 3 full seconds, her pen motionless. Then she pressed the intercom and asked for the room's dictation system to be activated. Brennan slid the manila folder across the glass table and did not open the freezer bag. "I need someone who can verify what these are before I open them outside my house again." Through the conference room glass, Simone could see the lobby. Nell had gotten her tape. She was pressing a strip of it across the freezer bag's handwritten label and writing on it in green crayon, her letters careful and large. "Not ours yet." Simone looked at those 3 words longer than the sentence required. She turned back to Brennan with a different set of questions, not about chain of custody this time, but about what he intended to do. "I intend to do nothing until someone qualified tells me what these are," he said. "That is what I came here for." Franklin Ketter's black sedan was idling at the curb outside Nell's school at 3:15. when Brennan arrived for pickup. Franklin stepped out alone. He was tall, silver at the temples, wearing a camel overcoat that cost more than Brennan's truck and the garage rent combined. He waited until Brennan had buckled Nell into her booster seat and closed the rear door before he spoke, the way a man speaks when he wants witnesses to see a conversation, but not hear one. 200,000 by dinner, and this stays a mistake. Brennan leaned against the truck's quarter panel with his arms folded. Behind the window glass, Nell was showing Copperpot something in her backpack. "You are aware of what you found," Franklin continued. His voice was polished, level, free of any sharpness that might be quoted. "And I am aware that custody judges remember names. Theft charges have a way of making fathers look unstable." The school crossing guard stood 50 feet away. A mother pushed a stroller past them without looking up. The afternoon was ordinary except for the thin wire of threat running through it. "Write it down, then ask me again." Franklin smiled the way men smile when they believe patience is a luxury only they can afford. He returned to the sedan. The door closed without a sound, and the car pulled away clean. 2 floors below Simone's office, in a basement archive lit by fluorescent tubes and cooled to 62 degrees, Kelvin Voigt fed curled microfiche into a reader with cotton gloves and a pencil behind one ear. The archive smelled like cold paper and toner, and the particular stillness of rooms where records outlived the people who made them. The bond series Brennan had brought in matched corporate authorization records from 1981. Several certificates in adjacent serial ranges had been redeemed decades earlier through normal channels, but the numbers in Brennan's packets remained open, never presented, never canceled, never reported lost or stolen through the SEC's program. "These were supposed to vanish only if someone kept them dry," Kelvin said, not looking up from the reader. "Someone did." Simone pulled the original purchaser file from the archive cage. The account connected to a Ketter family holding company that had been dissolved during a contentious divorce proceeding in 1989. The bonds had been purchased 2 years before the dissolution and never appeared on any disclosure filing. She requested a full lost and stolen securities check, sealed the file, and locked the cage. Brennan made pancakes the next morning, and they came out uneven, thick on one side where the batter pooled against the pan's warped bottom. Nell ate 3 without complaint. She had her own spiral notebook open beside her plate, the one with the purple cover she had chosen at the dollar store, and across the top she had written, "Lost Things Ledger" in capital letters, the G backward. Under it, in her best printing, "Copperpot, not lost today." Below that, "Toolbox, found, not ours yet." Brennan almost laughed. Then he saw she had drawn the toolbox at the bottom of the page with chains around it and a question mark where the lock had been, and the laugh did not come. "Dad doesn't keep lost things," Nell said, not looking up from her cereal. "He writes names on them until they find home." "That is close enough." She looked up from the notebook and studied him with the serious attention she usually reserved for deciding whether Copperpot needed his ribbon retied. "Did someone lose that money on purpose?" "I think someone hid it." "That's different from losing." "Yes, it is." He washed the warped pan because a new one was not in the budget, dried it, and hung it on the hook where it had hung for 3 years. He did not tell her that the chains she drew were closer to the truth than she knew. The court-supervised inventory request took Simone 11 days to force through Ketter's legal objections. The family estate workshop sat behind the main house on 3 acres of river-facing land, a climate-controlled outbuilding with steel shelving, sealed concrete floors, and a dehumidifier that was still running on a timer after all the years. Brennan stood beside Rhea Solano, who had driven from her legal aid office in a car with a cracked windshield, and the faint smell of the courthouse vending machine where she had been shaking loose a packet of crackers for a client's child 20 minutes before the call came. She was sharp-jawed and patient in the way people are patient when patience is the only resource they have never run out of, and she had helped Brennan through his custody paperwork 3 years earlier, without once making him feel like a case number. Kelvin found the drawer in the back corner. Steel, fitted with desiccant packets, blank oilcloth of the same grade as the wrapping in the toolbox, and a handwritten ledger. The ledger listed serial numbers in the same sequential range as the bonds Brennan had brought in. The handwriting matched estate documents already filed with the county. Next to each entry, a column marked "Location" read simply, Kbox/shop. Franklin stood near the door with his attorney. His face did not change, but his hands went into his coat pockets, and they stayed there. His attorney whispered something. Franklin did not respond. The room was doing the work his attorney could not undo. Rhea opened the probate filing she had subpoenaed and turned to the final page. Franklin's signature sat at the bottom of a sworn affidavit declaring, under penalty of perjury, that no undisclosed negotiable instruments or bearer securities existed in the estate. "This stopped being a finder's dispute 3 signatures ago," Rhea said. "My father kept ledgers for things that no longer mattered," Franklin said. His voice was still level. His hands were still hidden. Nobody answered him. The dehumidifier clicked off on its timer, and in the silence that followed, Brennan touched the pencil in his shirt pocket, the one Nell had given him that morning, her backup, in case he needed to write something important. And he said nothing until Rhea told him he could speak. Rhea's legal aid office had water stains on the ceiling tiles shaped like coastlines nobody had mapped. The window unit vibrated when it cycled and made the blinds tap against the glass in an unsteady rhythm that Brennan suspected Rhea no longer heard. She sat across from him with a yellow legal pad and a pen that had been chewed at the cap. Not by her, probably by a client's child from years back. And she explained the path forward. The bonds stayed sealed, documented, and court-accessible. Any private transaction would destroy his standing as a protected finder. There would likely be a lawful finder's award and trust-supervised compensation, but the process would be measured in months, not days, and patience was not optional. "Clean hands matter more when rich people start washing theirs," she said. "Tell me what not to touch." She told him. He wrote it down in the same careful hand he used for tool inventories, the same hand that had logged the serial numbers on a kitchen table. Rhea watched him write and understood something about this man that Simone had not yet seen. His record-keeping was not caution. It was character. He documented things the way other men locked doors, because the world was easier to survive when you could prove where you had been. Nell colored quietly on old intake forms at the corner of Rhea's desk, using a set of crayons she kept in Copperpot's ribbon pocket. When she finished, she handed Rhea a drawing of the corduroy badger standing in front of a safe with his arms out, one button eye wide open, guarding. Rhea pinned it to the corkboard above her desk without a word, between a court calendar and a photo of her law school class that had faded to the color of weak tea. Brennan found the pry marks on the garage service door at 6 the next morning. The aluminum latch plate was bent outward in a clean crescent, where a flat bar had been seated and leaned on hard. Inside, one shelf had been cleared, the shelf where the Kennedy toolbox had sat for 2 weeks. His spiral repair notebook was gone. The wire binding had left a small curl on the concrete floor, like a question mark that had given up. The bonds were safe. He had moved them to Rhea's office 4 days earlier, wrapped in a grocery bag inside a filing cabinet that locked with a key Rhea wore on her lanyard. Gus came through the side door with 2 coffees in paper cups and stopped when he saw the bent door frame. He set the coffees on the bench, knelt, and studied the paint transfer on the latch plate, dark blue, institutional, the flat matte finish used on fleet vehicles by security contractors. "They did not come for money," Gus said. "They came for memory. Then they left hungry." Nell appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, barefoot on the cold concrete, holding Copperpot by one arm. She looked at the bent door, then at Brennan, then walked across the garage without speaking. She opened the Kennedy toolbox, placed the badger inside the top tray, and closed the lid with both hands. "He shouldn't be alone in there," she said. Brennan looked at the badger sitting in the toolbox where $5 million had been, and he understood his daughter better in that moment than he had in months of trying. She was not protecting the box. She was refusing to let the thing that had caused trouble become the thing that held fear. The police station smelled like burned coffee, floor wax, and the particular bureaucratic quiet of a building where everything is recorded. Franklin's theft complaint sat on Deputy Alden Pruitt's tablet beside the remains of a cold egg sandwich in wax paper. The complaint alleged that Brennan Yates had removed an heirloom toolbox from a private estate disposal load and was withholding family property valued in excess of $5 million. By noon, a local online reporter had published Brennan's full name, his neighborhood, and the word theft in a headline that did not contain the word alleged. By 2 o'clock, Brennan's landlord had called to ask if there was going to be a problem with the lease. Rhea arrived at the station with a banker's box of documents and the calm fury of a woman who had seen this pattern before. Simone came 20 minutes later, slower, her face carrying the particular stillness of someone whose board had called an emergency session that morning to discuss exposure. She held the transfer agent logs against her chest. Franklin sat in the hallway with his attorney, legs crossed at the ankle, composed. "By morning," he said as Brennan passed, "your daughter will hear the word thief before she hears your name." Brennan stopped. Down the hall, Nell sat in the waiting area on a plastic chair with her feet not touching the floor. She was looking at something on the duty officer's phone that he had left on the armrest, a screen showing the article with her father's name beside that word. Her face had gone still in a way that 6 years old should not know how to go still. "She already knows my name." He walked to her, knelt, and lifted the phone gently from her hands without looking at the screen. He looked at her. "I need you to hold Copperpot and count the ceiling tiles until I come back. Can you do that?" She nodded. She pulled the badger from inside her coat and held him with both arms, and she began to count. The county hearing room had fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency Brennan could feel behind his teeth and linoleum that squeaked under every chair. Rhea called witnesses in the order she had planned 3 nights earlier on her kitchen counter with index cards and a glass of water that went warm while she worked. She did not look at Franklin once. She did not need to. The documents looked at him for her. Velma Rook testified first. She brought the original yellow disposal ticket in a clear sleeve and the faxed correction form in a separate sleeve and laid them side by side on the table so the timestamps told the story. The original listed the toolbox as construction scrap placed in the public salvage lane, signed out by a Keter employee. The correction had arrived a full day after Brennan returned to verify the ticket. "Paper does not get cleaner because a rich man faxes it twice," Velma said, when Franklin's attorney challenged the chain of custody. Gus testified next. He described the angle grinder technique, the diamond cutoff wheel, the shallow approach angle, the cooling pauses, the wet fire blanket protecting the seams, and stated that the cut pattern was consistent with a man opening a box he had purchased from salvage, not one he had stolen from an estate. He also described the paint transfer on the garage door latch, dark blue, flat matte, matching the fleet color documented on vehicles used by Ketter's contracted security firm. Kelvin presented the serial number continuity from microfiche to certificate to estate ledger, the purchaser account linking the bonds to the dissolved Keter Holding Company, and the confirmation that no certificates in the range had ever been reported lost, stolen, or canceled through the SEC's program. The records were clean in a way that suggested they had been hidden, not misplaced. Simone spoke last. She stood with her hands flat on the table, a woman putting her name on testimony that her board had not authorized and might not forgive. And she described the sequence. Brennan's first visit, his refusal to open the packet outside a recorded room, his serial number documentation, the freezer bag with a child's crayon label reading, "Not ours yet." "I was wrong about the man who brought them in," she said. "He treated those certificates as evidence from the first hour. If he had not, they would have been frozen as stolen property, and the concealment in the estate would have survived another generation." Franklin's attorney requested a recess. Franklin did not move. His hands were in his pockets, his composure held in his face but nowhere else. The stillness had become the kind that costs effort to maintain, and everyone in the room could see the cost. Deputy Alden Pruitt, sitting in the back row, closed the theft complaint on his tablet. He did not reopen it. He looked at Brennan across the room and gave a single nod that carried more weight than the apology he would make later. Nell, in the hallway, had reached 47 ceiling tiles. She had not lost count once. Under magnification in the Vantage Verification Lab, the watermarks held steady across every certificate. The coupon perforations were intact, unclipped, worth decades of accrued value. The issue seals matched the corporate registrar's archive impressions down to the serif breaks. Kelvin worked through them one at a time with cotton gloves, while Brennan leaned against the far wall with his arms crossed, not touching anything, watching a man handle paper worth more than every tool he had ever owned, or ever would. Simone stood beside the light table. "The bonds will go through court and estate review," she said. "Not your pocket. The process will take time, and there will be lawyers involved who are not RIA. You should be prepared for that. So I do not get to fix everything today." Rhea stood beside him. "No. Today you just kept it from being broken worse." He asked whether the first reimbursement installment, whenever it arrived, could cover Nell's winter coat and the school lunch account balance. Rhea wrote it down without comment, because she understood that a man who asks for a coat and lunch money after refusing $5 million is not thinking small. He is thinking exact. Rain came through Braddock Ridge that evening and rinsed the alley behind the duplex until the concrete looked almost new. Water ran clean off the garage roof for the first time in months, carrying rust dust and grit into the drain. Gus returned the socket set he had borrowed in January and made no excuse for the delay, which was his way of admitting the delay had been strategic. He'd been waiting for an occasion that deserved a visit. Velma brought a paper bag of roast beef sandwiches from the place on 4th Street and said the landfill board had posted a new salvage policy, requiring duplicate logs and witness signatures on every contested disposal load. She seemed proud of the policy the way people are proud of doors they helped build and hang. Deputy Alden Pruitt stopped by in his cruiser, rolled the window down, and said he was sorry for the way the complaint had been handled. He did not make a speech, and he did not linger. Brennan nodded once, and that was enough for both of them. Nell helped him oil the Kennedy toolbox hinges with a rag torn from a clean shop towel, working the oil into each pin the way she had watched him do on 100 smaller repairs. The lid swung open without resistance, without sound. "It opens nicer when it is not hiding," she said. "Most things do." She retrieved Copperpot from the top tray. He had been there since the morning of the break-in, guarding nothing and everything, and sat him on the bench where he could see the whole garage. Simone came to the garage on a Thursday, 3 weeks after the hearing. She carried a formal letter confirming Brennan's protected witness status, a reimbursement schedule, and a county contract for restoration work on seized Ketter tools and equipment held in evidence storage. It was steady work. It paid fairly. It matched exactly what his hands had always known how to do. She noticed the toolbox on the bench. He had sanded the worst of the rust, primed the bare steel, and repainted it close to the original red. A careful, patient job, the kind of repair that respects what something was before it was damaged. But he had left the cut mark on the latch plate, the thin, bright line where the diamond wheel had separated the shackle, visible and untouched. He had not filled it. He had not sanded it smooth. He had clear-coated over it so it would not rust again, but the mark itself remained. "You left the cut mark," she said. "That is how it opened." She looked at him the way a person looks when they are revising something they believed was settled, and for a moment the garage held nothing but the drip of rainwater off the gutter and the low hum of the shop light warming up. Nell climbed off her stool, crossed the garage, and opened the top drawer of the Kennedy box. She placed Copperpot inside with care, his one button eye facing up, his green ribbon smoothed flat against the corduroy, and she closed the drawer with both hands. "He's the first honest thing ever stored in there," she said. Brennan closed the lid gently, not to hide anything, but to keep it safe. If this story helped you breathe a little easier, subscribe and leave a comment about someone in your life who keeps records because records don't need courage.